With the Switch 2 on the horizon, presumably set to release later this year, I thought it would be an appropriate time to reflect on the best 10 out of 10 Nintendo Switch JRPGs everyone should play. Some are exclusive, some are not, but if you own a Nintendo Switch and you haven't played some of these games, it's time. Now to kick off, I wanted to start with one of the most beloved Nintendo JRPGs of all time, and that's Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Now, just a little bit of context, I find it hilarious that Nintendo didn't even want to localize this back on the Wii initially, Operation Rainfall anyone? And now after this entire generation later, it's one of Nintendo's most beloved IPs pumping out Game of the Year contenders. But let's forget about all that. What made Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition so great? Well, first, it's got an epic, emotionally gripping story with deep lore and unforgettable characters. It's really cool how it sets up the story initially, like you get to know everyone very slowly, but then things ramp up really quickly and you just want to keep going to the next story moment because you're like, okay, they gave us a little hint of the mystery, they gave us a little hint of what's going on, so you just want to keep going to see what happens next. And of course, I think one of the biggest things is its massive open world filled with breathtaking landscapes and secrets to uncover. And here in the Definitive Edition, exploring is much easier thanks to the maps, because in the original Wii version, it was kind of hard to get around and figure out where you're supposed to go, but here they totally fixed it, and you shave off a lot of hours because it's so much easier to find your way around. But regardless, it's just really fun to explore a huge world, so many little secrets to find, caves to explore, and the environments are just absolutely gigantic. And of course, it has this really unique real-time combat system, kind of out of an MMO where you have abilities on cooldown, you're kind of just always auto-attacking, and then you're trying to, break, topple, things like that. And of course, here it has a beautifully remastered visual style and an updated soundtrack. And while people think of this as a remaster, I call it a remake because look at those visuals. Those are not at all the same visuals from the original Wii game. They remade them, hence the name remake, and it just looks so much better for it. And the other thing they added here that I love is you can actually visually see your equipment, so you can kind of outfit your characters however you want. Not to mention it has some awesome music from some of the greatest composers in the industry, and they added the future connected epilogue that adds a ton of new story content for those that have played the original Wii version tons of times. So if you love massive worlds to explore with charming characters, you gotta play Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Now, arguably the best Fire Emblem, certainly the most popular and best-selling, is Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now here, the game takes place in a school setting. It's kind of Persona-inspired, which I'll touch on in a little bit, and your character is an instructor. At the beginning, you're given the choice between one of three houses to lead and teach to, and depending on which one you choose, there's wildly different stories and different characters that you'll be able to use. This really encourages replayability to see all the different stories because they are very different. And there's also a rich cast of characters with well-developed personalities and backstories. And there's lots of different ways you can get to know your characters, not just on the battlefield and in class, but you can have food with them, you can have a little tea party with them, just lots of different ways that you can interact with these characters and get to know them in deeper ways. So when the time comes to get on the battlefield, you feel much more invested in all your characters. And like I said earlier, it is kind of Persona inspired because the game sort of works on a calendar system where you're on this campus, you're walking around, you do activities, that takes up time. You can then bond with these characters, you can train them up, you can level up stats. It's just a really addictive loop. Not to mention a really gorgeous anime style presentation and an outstanding soundtrack. And of course, the thing about every Fire Emblem game is its deep tactical gameplay with engaging turn-based strategy battles. Now, of course, it is still turn-based combat on a grid-based map, but here they added something called battalions. Basically, these are like little squads that you can equip on each of your characters, so whenever they attack an enemy, it seems like they've got like a squad with them and they do big damage. Overall, though, I felt like the combat was a little easy compared to past Fire Emblem games, and maybe that's for the best because this seems like the entry point for Fire Emblem and the one that most people played. But for those that want to up the difficulty, you could turn on permadeath, make it much harder, so there are ways to make it more challenging. But if you ever wanted to try a good strategy RPG but never got into them because they looked daunting, or you just never played Three Houses for whatever reason, definitely give it a try. Now, speaking of things that are 10 out of 10, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Factor. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service. Factor takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success. Skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door. There's over 35 meals you can choose from, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, and my personal favorite, protein plus. As I've incorporated weight training into my personal health journey, having the extra protein in meals that are ready to eat in only 2 minutes has been a lifesaver. Whether you're on your own health journey, don't have the time to cook, or simply don't like to cook, I know you're gonna love Factor. And you can get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box by using my link. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. By signing up for Factor, it directly supports me and helps me to continue making more and better content for you. Thanks once again to Factor for sponsoring this video, and now back to the video. The Super Mario RPG remake is wonderfully charming and will put a smile on your face the entire time you're playing it. It's a blend of classic Mario characters with JRPG mechanics. You'll be running around with Mario, jumping on guys, but then you're doing turn-based combat. It's really cool. And it has this very whimsical, lighthearted feel to it because it's not like, oh, you're on this big adventure and it's like the end of the world. It's very lighthearted with the music, with the tone, and with everything you're doing. And what's cool is you actually team up with Bowser to defeat a foe that's overtaken his castle. And outside of familiar characters you would know from other Mario games, there's memorable party members unique to this game, like fan favorites Geno and Mallow. And it's just a cool way to interact with and explore the Mushroom Kingdom. Like, you can go to these different zones, run around, talk to characters. Of course, you do have the ability to jump, you got the question blocks, familiar Mario enemies, and of course, new ones. Now, people really praise this turn-based combat system, and it's kind of the one that sort of popularized this sort of timing-based combat system. Essentially, when you attack, you have to time a button press just at the right time for extra damage, and then when you're about to get hit, if you time it at the right time, you'll get reduced damage. And there's so many cool, unique environments with creative enemy designs that make every area exciting. And this remake is gorgeous. It is not a remaster. This is a ground up remake, and it's done so well. There's so many good quality of life features, like being able to kind of fast travel and explore the map a lot easier. It looks great. It runs great. It sounds great. Man, this has an amazing soundtrack. Sometimes you play a game and I'm going to listen to a podcast, or I'm not going to have the sound on. This is a game where you need to listen to the music, because if you don't, it's a totally different experience. And the other thing that I like as a busy adult is that it's relatively short, only 12-ish hours. So it's not going to take up a ton of your time. This is genuinely one of the best JRPGs of all time, starring one of the greatest video game characters of all time. And if you haven't played it, you really need to. Now, one of the best action JRPGs of the last decade, and the game that broke Ys out of obscurity, is Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. Now, when you begin the game, you're on a cruise ship, but very quickly it shipwrecks on a mysterious island, and so your mission is to find all the missing passengers and unravel the mysteries of this island. It's just so fun to explore. The game is very snappy, very quick, very arcadey, really intuitive combat, and it just feels immediately fun. Now, it started with Ys 7, but I feel like it popularized it here in Ys 8, where you have 3 characters and you can kind of swap between them on the fly, and each character has a particular way of attacking, and certain enemies are weak to these ways of attacking, so you're constantly having to swap your different characters. It just feels very fluid, very dynamic, and you're always trying to do different things in the game. And I think the thing that people liked most about this game was exploring the island and slowly filling up and building out your camp. I mean, this island is gigantic, and there's so much to explore, so many little nooks, and at times there are things that are blocked off, and you need a certain number of passengers or castaways to unblock it. So it's really satisfying once you finally get enough castaways to go do that, and then you go to this new area and figure out, okay, what's going on over here? And of course, it has an incredible soundtrack that enhances every moment of gameplay. I mean, Sunshine Coastline that's playing right now is one of the all-time best tracks in any JRPG, and all the boss battle music is epic as well. Not to mention a really cool dual protagonist story. I mean, you play as Adol for most of this game, but then you're going to meet the enigmatic Dana, and it's really interesting to unravel her mystery and see how she's wrapped up in all of this, and she has a really cool combat system in her own right. If you've never played Ys, this is the perfect entry point and most people's favorite entry, so if you haven't given it a try, you definitely need to. One of the most unexpected masterpieces of the last decade is Nier Automata. Now, the original didn't review or sell very well. It was very clunky. The combat wasn't very good. I think people just didn't give it the chance it deserved. Thankfully, it did get a remake later on. And what's really wild is Nier Automata has sold over 9 million copies. This thing is a massive hit for Square Enix. The story is a philosophical and emotionally powerful one that challenges the player's perspectives. You play from the perspective of 3 different androids, 2B, 9S, and A2. do. And there's a lot of thought-provoking themes of existentialism, identity, and humanity. Like, what does it mean to be a human? And for these different androids, like, what does it mean for themselves to just be alive? At first, it seems like, we're just fighting some robots trying to help out Earth, but then the story becomes something that you're totally not expecting. And the other thing about this game is that it has multiple endings. And I'm not talking about like Kingdom Hearts where you need to complete everything. I'm talking like there's some joke endings where if you go the wrong way, the game ends and you just start over pretty quickly. And then there's sort of different endings like for each character. But the thing I really enjoy about it, and I think a lot of people do as well, is its mix of action RPG combat with sort of like bullet hell mechanics and platforming. Now, the development team on this was Platinum Games. So you're gonna have that signature blistering fast action combat. It's buttery smooth to play, some of the best action combat you can experience out there. But the thing that Yoko Taro, the director for the game, likes to do is have these like odd perspective shifts. Like most of the game, it's going to be third person behind the shoulder camera, but then every once in a while it's like top down or 2D, or like you're doing these weird hacking mini games with 9S. So there's a lot of unique gameplay scenarios in this game. Not to mention a hauntingly beautiful soundtrack that perfectly complements the game's themes. Almost in every track there's these sort of like ethereal vocals, and it seems like it's in a made-up language, like if they blended French and Japanese or something like that. It's just so beautiful and gorgeous. And it did win Best Soundtrack that year at the Game Awards, fittingly so because I think this is one of the best JRPG soundtracks, or just any video game soundtracks ever made. I'm honestly kind of surprised Square Enix hasn't made a sequel to this game yet. It's been quite a few years, but that's perfect for you if you haven't played this game, because you got all the time to play it and it's absolutely worth it. Now, what could I possibly say about Persona 5 Royal that I haven't said in a dozen other videos? It's one of the most stylish and polished turn-based RPGs ever made. Everything from opening a menu to starting a battle to literally just walking around has style. I mean, you're splashing colors as you're walking around. The menus are ridiculous, and people have actually cosplayed the game's menus. I mean, name me another game where people have cosplayed menus. Now, as for the story, it's this gripping tale of mystery, rebellion, and heart, where you're these teenagers trying to take down corrupt adults. And that's basically every chapter of the game. There's some sort of corrupt adult, you're trying to change their heart, and there's just such a fantastic cast of diverse characters. They all have wildly different personalities, and it's so much fun to get to know them and see how they all interact with each other. And of course, the thing I loved most, and what a lot of people love about the Persona games, are the deep and rewarding social simulation mechanics. You have the school activities where you can just study, go to school, do tests. You have side jobs that you can do, lots of different hobbies. You can go play baseball, go play darts. You can hang out with your friends. There's a seemingly endless amount of fun side activities to do that make you stronger in combat as well. And speaking of combat, it's super engaging and strategic. You have a team of 4 characters, and it has this one more system where if you weaken an enemy, you get one more attack. And if you weaken the entire group of enemies, you can do an all-out attack. And there's also something new here in Persona 5 Royal called Showtime attacks, where you can have 2 characters team up for big attacks. And you also have a brand new character, Kasumi, as well as other confidants that you can get to know better. I mean, this game is well over 100 hours long. And of course, there's like the new extra semester that wasn't in the original Persona 5. So if you haven't played the Royal version or just never played it for whatever reason, it's kind of perfect on Switch because you can play it in handheld mode. And I just feel like it suits that really, really well. So once again, if you haven't played Persona 5 Royal, like, what are you doing? Give it a try. And to go from something ultra modern to something ultra classic, we have Dragon Quest XI-S Echoes of an Elusive Age. Now, the story is kind of tropey. You're the chosen one, the luminary who's destined to save the world. You'll explore this massive, gorgeous world, recruiting a ragtag team to help you. And then kind of in the last half of the game, you're collecting MacGuffins. So like, it couldn't be more tropey outside of maybe having amnesia. And I also think it has one of the best parties in any JRPG. They're just so diverse, so unique. They have such strong personalities that leave huge impressions on you. I contributed to an entire collaboration video over on FemTrooper's channel, so I'll leave a link to it if you want to go watch it there. And it has classic turn-based combat. Now, it's nothing to like write home about. It's not amazing. Each character kind of has their own assigned role, whether it be a healer, a warrior, a monk, a mage, something like that. It's kind of simple, but it works. And in this S version, you can speed up the combat to make it go a little bit faster, which is nice. And it just has this gorgeous 3D world. It's so much fun to explore. Every town was a joy to just walk around, go to every house, get all the different treasure chests before moving on to the story. But here in the S version, you can also play a 16-bit version of the game where you can switch the graphics, which is kind of cool. The S version also has a fully orchestrated soundtrack as opposed to the kind of more MIDI versions of the songs, lots of quality of life improvements. And there's also just tons of side content, lots of side quests to take on. There's also the casino, lots of different mini games games, there's crafting, and I'll also say this is relatively easy. So if you've been wanting to get into the Dragon Quest games and heard they're kind of grindy, Dragon Quest XI is one of the best entry points because it's not grindy at all, fairly easy, almost too easy, but be warned, this is a beefy one. It's a very, very long game. But if you own a Nintendo Switch, it's an absolute must play. Now, another game I feel like I've been talking a lot about lately and is a love letter to classic 16-bit JRPGs is Chained Echoes. Now, I feel like it has direct nods to games like Final Fantasy VI in that you're switching the viewpoints between the different party members, Chrono Trigger in the way that you just initiate combat right on the field, but then it also just does a lot of its own cool new things. The party members are great. They have unique personalities, and once they finally all get together, it's really fun to watch them interact and see their different viewpoints on what's going on. It has gorgeous pixel art, and this is not like trying to be Super Nintendo era specific. This is like, hey, we're in the modern day. Let's see if we can do something different with pixel art. Very big character models, very detailed environments. It's just a joy to explore the environments and see all the different things they did. And each environment feels so alive. Everything's so well animated, so many cool little details. I just can't believe this was basically made by one person. But I think this game's unique selling point is its spin on turn-based combat. You do have 4 party members and you can swap any of them out mid-fight. There is a speed up mechanic. You can see the turn order at all times. See, there's all those nice things, but then they have something called the overdrive meter. Basically, there's this meter and you're kind of always trying to stay right in the middle in that green area because this will give you big buffs in combat, but you don't want to overdo it and be in the red because then that gives the enemy an advantage. And the way you manage that is basically anytime you do an attack, it pushes the meter up, but if you defend or just do a basic attack or use an item, something like that, it'll kind of stay where it is or push it back a little bit. So it's a super cool way to balance the game so you're not just using your strongest moves all the time. And the other thing I liked about this game is there's not really any grinding. It's much more about just getting through the levels because you don't get traditional experience. You have this sort of like skill board. And as you level up, you'll get a certain amount of points that you can spend to put into new skills. And also there is mech combat in this game. So yeah, that's pretty cool. This is easily one of the best indie JRPGs ever made and you've got to try it. Now, despite selling well and getting a certain amount of praise, I still feel like Unicorn Overlord is really overlooked for how incredible it is. It revives an older style of tactical RPGs. It's kind of like Ogre Battle, but has a lot more modern quality of life features. And I feel like the main crux of this game is its engaging battles with a mix of turn-based and real-time mechanics. Basically, when you start the game, you just throw out a certain number of squads, and each squad can have, I think, up to 5 or 6 characters in a squad. And so once the battle starts, everything happens in real time. And so you'll assign actions like, okay, this squad, go fight this other squad, or go take down this tower, or go take over this area. And then you can also manage the squads by initiating their special attacks, like charging if like the leader is a guy on a horse, or maybe shooting arrows, something like that. And there's also buttons where you can speed up the real-time aspect of it so it doesn't feel like a slog. And typically what you're trying to do in every mission is take over a map or defeat an enemy. And there is sort of a weakness system to the game, so you have to really build and command your squads carefully so they don't get taken out or get assigned to attack the wrong squad and get taken out easily. Now, when you first start the game, you have a really small team. You basically only have like 1 or 2 squads, but as the game goes on, they slowly grow, and that becomes a very addicting part of the game to just recruit all these different characters, build out your squads to see how strong they can be and like customize them exactly how you want. And of course, just clearing out the maps, like finding all the different little secrets. And in a way, the game kind of has non-linear storytelling because after the first area, you're given the choice of like which other maps to go to. Now, some are obviously meant to be taken out first because they're going to be way too low level, but you do have a little bit of choice initially. And these maps are just huge. There's so much to find and explore. Like I said, hidden treasures, hidden little side quests where you can get new characters or just good items and money. I just love the exploration aspect of it. And of course, you have that gorgeous art style from Vanillaware, that signature watercolor style that's perfectly fitting in a game like this. And there are just so many incredible character designs, and there's so many characters. I'm kind of impressed that they managed to make so many and have them look unique. Now, I will admit that the game does get a little easy by the end, but as they say, it's more about the journey than the destination. And the journey that Unicorn Overlord takes you on is a wild one, well worth taking. And speaking of wild journeys, I guarantee you that you've never experienced a game quite like 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. Now, funnily enough, it is the same developer as Unicorn Overlord, but it's very different. It's sort of a unique blend of visual novel storytelling with real-time strategy combat, but much faster. The majority of the game, you'll be in these 2D segments. You'll just be exploring areas, engaging in conversation, trying to kind of figure out what's going on in the game. It's not terribly interactive, but every once in a while to kind of mix things up, you have these strategy battles where you have mechs that are assigned assigned to different areas on this very simplistic map. You give the mechs orders, and you're usually trying to protect a specific area, and like I said, it's much more fast-paced than Unicorn Overlord. I will say it's relatively simple and usually not that hard, but mainly used to mix up the gameplay, which I kind of liked. But the main reason you're going to want to play this game is its deep, intricate narrative with intertwining storylines. As the title of the game implies, there are 13 playable main characters, each with their own perspective on the mystery. Typically, you'll select a character, play their story, new ones unlock, and then with each new unlocking story, you're slowly peeling away the layers of the game's mysteries, and you're kind of going back and forth between all these different characters to get a new perspective on the same thing that kind of just happened. Now, at first, it might not seem that interesting, but I'm telling you, there are genuine jaw-on-the-floor, shocking moments, and you're just going to want to keep playing to see what happens next and how everything is connected. By the end, I could not believe how masterfully told and perfectly woven together this story was. Genuinely one of my all-time favorite video game stories. And of course, it has that gorgeous hand-drawn art style from Vanillaware. But what I love about this game is that Vanillaware typically makes games in fantasy settings, but this is like a futuristic sci-fi game. So it was really cool to see their take on that with technology and robots and environments and stuff like that. I just thought it looked really cool. And this is an absolutely amazing game, but be warned, once you start playing, you're gonna have a very hard time putting this down. Now, these are 10 out of 10 Nintendo Switch JRPGs everyone should play, but to see my personal list of 10 out of 10 JRPGs, make sure you watch this video next.